From a fake dentist to the big red machine, from a generic babyface to a charismatic rapper, these are the best WWE gimmick changes that saved a wrestler's career, starting with none other than the man formerly known as Bradshaw. For most of his early career, John Layfield was a background character. He debuted in 1995 with a cowboy gimmick named Justin Hawk Bradshaw that went nowhere, and eventually landed as one half of the Acolyte Protection Agency alongside Ron Simmons. The APA had charm, it was fun, and audiences liked it. But nobody considered Bradshaw a main event player. So when Farouk was drafted away and the APA dissolved after the brand split in 2002, Bradshaw was left adrift on Raw, picking up hardcore title reigns and going absolutely nowhere. But then, in the spring of 2004, everything changed. With the departure of Brock Lesnar and Eddie Guerrero holding the gold, SmackDown needed a top heel. Layfield, who had been a successful stock market investor in real life, brought the persona of the arrogant, loudmouthed rich man to TV, and JBL, the wrestling god, was born. His first promo had him patrolling the Texas-Mexico border. He was handed the #1 contendership to Eddie Guerrero's WWE Championship, and what followed at the Great American Bash 2004 was a brutal, bloody brawl that ended with JBL as champion. He held the championship for 280 days, the longest SmackDown championship reign in history at the time. His cabinet stable, built in the image of a corporate power structure, gave SmackDown its top villain. His promos made fans boo, the gimmick drew real heat, and perhaps most importantly, his run as the insufferable champion was the perfect foil to elevate a young John Cena into the hero that generation needed. Without JBL, there is no crowning moment for Cena at WrestleMania 21. After losing the title, JBL would go on to win the Intercontinental Championship, become one of WWE's most well-known commentators, and earn a permanent spot in the company's history. None of that happens without the suit, the limo, and the audacity to become someone completely different. But if you think JBL's transformation was wild, this next wrestler on our list literally rewrote wrestling history with his gimmick change. Glenn Jacobs is one of the greatest powerhouses in the history of professional wrestling. He is a multi-time world champion, a 12-time tag team champion, a WWE Grand Slam champion. He is also, by his own admission, one of the least prepared performers to ever receive a WWE television debut. When Vince McMahon flew Jacobs to Stamford for a meeting in 1995, he had an idea for Jacobs to work as a wrestling dentist. He debuted as Isaac Yankem, Jerry Lawler's personal tooth-pulling hired gun, dispatched to destroy Bret Hart. The character's entrance music was a dental drill. His teeth were intentionally painted to look rotten. Vince, famously, thought the irony of a dentist with bad teeth was gold, but the audience disagreed. Yankem's run was a string of high-profile losses, and by spring of 1996, the character was quietly retired. But Jacobs wasn't done. WWE had one more idea. When Kevin Nash and Scott Hall left for WCW in 1996, the company made the baffling decision to introduce replacement versions of Diesel and Razor Ramon. Jacobs was handed the Diesel costume, and the angle collapsed almost immediately. After 2 failed gimmicks in 2 years, a lesser performer would have found the door. Instead, Jacobs found a mask. On October 5, 1997, at In Your House, Bad Blood, the lights went out, and a 7-foot monster in a red and black mask walked through fire to confront The Undertaker. The story was that The Undertaker had a younger brother, Kane, who had been burned as a child and had spent his life in an asylum. Now, as an adult, he was here for revenge. Paul Bearer, his manager, gave the whole thing a gothic weight that made it feel like myth. Kane defeated Stone Cold Steve Austin for the WWF Championship in 1998 and went on to become one of the most reliable performers in the company's history. From a dentist with a drill for entrance music to the Big Red Machine, wrestling has never had a longer road to greatness. However, this wasn't the only time when a supernatural gimmick resurrected a wrestler's career. Wyndham Rotunda came from a respected wrestling bloodline. His father was Mike Rotunda, better known as IRS. His uncle was Barry Windham. His grandfather was Blackjack Mulligan. Wrestling was in his DNA. But what wasn't in his DNA, apparently, was a gimmick worth a damn. He debuted on the original NXT game show format in June 2010 as Husky Harris, a name that Rotunda hated. Harris was assigned Cody Rhodes as his pro, placed in a format that had him compete in obstacle courses and pole competitions, and was voted off the show before he could gain any traction. In November 2010, he resurfaced on the main roster as part of the Nexus, the faction that had invaded and attacked John Cena and everyone near him. However, within the faction, Harris had no individual identity, no moment to call his own. And after CM Punk took control of the group and rebranded it as the New Nexus, Harris's time was almost up. Randy Orton punted him in the head in January 2011, and he was sent back to developmental. But what happened next is one of the most extraordinary gimmick changes in WWE history. Rotunda worked with the late Dusty Rhodes to build something entirely new. The inspiration was Max Cady from Cape Fear and a brief, mostly forgotten mid-90s WWE character named Waylon Mercy. What emerged from the experiment was Bray Wyatt, a swamp-dwelling, lantern-carrying cult leader who spoke in riddles and whispered promises to his followers. He called himself the Eater of Worlds. He said he was not a man, but an idea, and ideas cannot die. Wyatt returned to the main roster in 2013 alongside Luke Harper and Eric Rowan as the Wyatt family, and the wrestling world stopped to notice. He feuded with John Cena, The Shield, The Undertaker, and Randy Orton. He won the WWE Championship in 2017. He won the Universal Championship twice, and in 2019, he reinvented himself again as The Fiend, a supernatural horror character that became, for a time, the hottest thing in wrestling. Wyndham Rotunda passed away in August 2023, far too young at just 36. But what he left behind was proof that the right character in the right hands can become something completely magical. Husky Harris was a name, but Bray Wyatt was a legend. And speaking of multi-generational wrestlers who were saddled with bad gimmicks, up next, let's talk about the most crucial gimmick change in WWE history. When Rocky debuted at Survivor Series 1996, the audience saw a manufactured babyface with a bad haircut and a silver spoon, and they rejected him immediately. The "Die Rocky Die" chants started taking over arenas, and the thing is, Rocky wasn't a bad worker. He was athletic, he was coachable, but the character was the definition of vanilla. There was nothing underneath it. No edge, no hunger, no sense that he was anything more than a good-looking kid who'd been handed a shortcut. Fans knew it, and they made their feelings known every single week, cheering the heels he faced just to spite the push. Then, in the spring of 1997, a knee injury gave everyone a moment to breathe. When Johnson returned, something had shifted. He joined the Nation of Domination and became The Rock. He referred to himself in the third person. He called himself the most electrifying man in sports entertainment before anyone believed it. And slowly, through sheer force of personality, fans started to believe it too. He overthrew Farouk and took control of the nation. He aligned himself with Vince McMahon and won his first WWF championship at Survivor Series 1998. The promos became legendary. His catchphrases became part of mainstream pop culture. He won 7 WWF championships. He headlined WrestleMania multiple times. He feuded against everyone from Austin to Cena to Lesnar. He was the most electrifying performer on the microphone the industry has ever seen. And he parlayed all of it into a Hollywood career that made him the biggest movie star in the world. None of it happens if Vince McMahon keeps pushing Rocky as a babyface. The most successful reinvention in wrestling history started with a crowd that wanted nothing to do with him, and a man who turned that hatred into fuel. However, The Rock wasn't the only person in his bloodline who underwent a character transformation. 2 decades later, after the Die Rocky Die chants, the fans had a similar reaction towards the big dog. For years, Roman Reigns was the most booed babyface in professional wrestling. When he debuted as part of The Shield in 2012, he was protected by the faction and loved for it. He was the powerhouse, the wrecking ball, standing next to Dean Ambrose and Seth Rollins with clearly the most natural physical presence of the three. He had the fans behind him. But when The Shield dissolved in 2014 and WWE immediately positioned him as the next John Cena, the audience revolted. The Royal Rumble victory in 2015 drew thunderous boos. The championship opportunities were met with a negative reaction. Creative gave him lines like "suffering succotash" and feuds built around dog food with Baron Corbin. The gap between how WWE presented him and what the audience actually wanted was enormous, and it didn't close for years. He won the WWE Championship multiple times during this period, but none of it felt earned in the way it needed to. Then came the leukemia diagnosis in late 2018. For the first time, the audience saw the real man underneath the character. He returned from illness in early 2019 to a reception that was finally warm. But the creative still hadn't caught up, and when the world shut down in the spring of 2020, Reigns stepped away entirely. He returned at SummerSlam 2020 with Paul Heyman at his side, and that's when wrestling history changed forever. The tactical vest was gone. The fist-pumping babyface was buried. In his place stood the tribal chief, cold, deliberate, arrogant, demanding that everyone in his life acknowledge him. He won the Universal Championship that same year and kickstarted the most historic reign in modern WWE. He told his family they would fall in line or suffer the consequences. He built the bloodline into the most compelling faction wrestling had seen in a generation. Roman Reigns went from hated babyface to one of the greatest heels in professional wrestling in 20 years. And it started the moment he stopped trying to be what everyone told him to be. However, while we're talking about Reigns and gimmick changes, we have to mention the guy who dethroned the tribal chief. There are legacies that lift you and legacies that bury you. For a long stretch of Cody Rhodes' career, his family name did both at the same time. The son of Dusty Rhodes and the half-brother of Goldust, Cody debuted on the main roster in 2007 and spent years as a reliable mid-carder who could never quite break through the ceiling above him. He was a two-time Intercontinental Champion, a six-time Tag Team Champion, but never the guy. Then, in 2014, WWE decided that Cody should become Stardust, a glittery, face-painted cosmic villain built as a spin-off of his brother's Goldust persona. Speaking in riddles about the cosmic key and the galactic universe, painting his face in black and gold, contorting his voice into a melodramatic hiss, Cody disappeared entirely inside a character that had no future. The harder he worked to make the gimmick work, the more it became clear that it simply wasn't meant to. By the time he got his release in May 2016, Stardust was all anyone associated with his name. But what came next was the most complete reinvention in modern wrestling. Outside WWE and unable to use his own surname due to trademark issues, he started competing simply as Cody across the independent circuit, Ring of Honor, and New Japan. And in those smaller arenas, away from the machine that had defined him, something clicked. He developed the American Nightmare, a character built in contrast to his father's American Dream persona. He won the ROH World Championship, the NWA World Heavyweight Championship, and became one of the most important figures in the founding of AEW in 2019. He returned to WWE at WrestleMania 38 as Seth Rollins' mystery opponent, and the building exploded. The American Nightmare was home. He defeated Rollins, then defeated him again inside Hell in a Cell with a completely torn pectoral muscle, competing through an injury so severe the footage became one of the most replayed moments of that year. He came back from surgery to win the 2023 Royal Rumble, then the 2024 Royal Rumble, and at WrestleMania 40, he defeated Roman Reigns to win the undisputed WWE Championship. Stardust was a dead end. The American Nightmare was his destiny, and Cody Rhodes spent 6 years away from WWE proving it. But while many of the stories on this list are about men who climbed out of obscurity, Dominik Mysterio's story is different. His problem was never obscurity. His problem was that everyone already knew exactly who he was. Dominik Mysterio had been on WWE television since he was 8 years old. The custody storyline between Rey Mysterio and Eddie Guerrero at SummerSlam 2005 is one of the most memorable angles of that era. Then he appeared once again during Rey's feud with CM Punk in 2010. A generation of wrestling fans watched him grow up ringside, so when he made his full-time debut in 2020, the ceiling was already built. The crowd only saw him as Rey's son. He had no edge, no character, and nothing about him that audiences could invest in independent of his father's legacy. But then, at Clash at the Castle in Cardiff, the match ended, and Dominik looked at Edge, a man who was like an uncle to him, and kicked him directly between the legs. The arena went into shock. Rey turned to his son, confused, pleading, reaching for him, and Dominik clotheslined his own father. Rhea Ripley and the Judgment Day watched from the corner and laughed. Dominik Mysterio was dead, and Dirty Dom was born. He became a cowardly heel hiding behind the Judgment Day, whining into microphones while crowds drowned him out with noise so loud WWE production couldn't compensate. Audiences who had watched him grow up felt genuinely betrayed, and he leaned into every inch of the heat. His feud with Rey culminated at WrestleMania 39, where his father beat him with a belt. He won the NXT North American Championship in 2023, proving he could carry a program without Rey's shadow when the character gave him something to work with. And at WrestleMania 41, he won the Intercontinental Championship in a four-way match, receiving the kind of crowd pop that suggested the tide was beginning to shift. The babyface Dominik Mysterio was Rey Mysterio's son. That was his whole identity. But Dirty Dom is his own man, a deeply terrible one, and that is exactly the point. Before there were 17 world title reigns, before there was Never Give Up, before there was the most recognized face in sports entertainment, there was a generic babyface on the verge of getting fired. John Cena arrived on the main roster in June 2002, debuting on SmackDown by answering Kurt Angle's open challenge, and then came months of nothing. He looked generic, had zero character, and he was lost in the shuffle of a ruthless aggression-era roster that included Brock Lesnar, Edge, Rey Mysterio, Chris Benoit, and Eddie Guerrero. There was no path forward. By his own account, he expected to be released. But then came a bus tour in Europe, a freestyle session among colleagues, and one Stephanie McMahon, who happened to hear it and suggested a new rapper gimmick for Cena. On the Halloween episode of SmackDown in 2002, John Cena appeared dressed as Vanilla Ice and delivered a rap. The following week, officially reborn with the new rapper Gimmick, he came to the ring in throwback jerseys, a backwards cap, and a chain with a padlock. The character was initially heel, but the audience couldn't bring themselves to boo him. He won his first United States Championship at WrestleMania 20. He defeated JBL at WrestleMania 21 to win his first WWE Championship. And just like that, the generic babyface from 2002 had become the face of the company. He eventually retired the rapper character and carried the company during the PG era as Super Cena. But none of it exists without those freestyles on SmackDown. However, Cena wasn't the first wrestler with a rapper gimmick. Many fans claim that he actually copied the gimmick from a WCW wrestler from the 90s. And if you want to know the whole story along with other wrestlers who copied gimmicks, check out this video next.